Hey there, Aries. I'm Isaac. Welcome to my channel. We're going to get into your tarot card reading for the month of September. So I'm going to go ahead and shuffle up these cards, and while I do that, just go through the usual spiel, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff that everyone always says at the beginning of these videos. Um, these readings tend to be more focused around things like spiritual development and evolution. For me, the tarot is kind of more of a spiritual diagnosis tool rather than fortune telling and talking about twin flames and soulmates and all that. I've been doing readings a long time, and frankly, I'm tired of that kind of stuff. So if you're into the twin flame thing or that's what you're looking for, there's plenty of that stuff out there. Probably not going to find it here though. So let's go ahead and get into your reading. All right, so Aries, first card, we got the World. Second card is the Moon. And this is a new channel, so obviously if things continue to grow, I'll get a camera and show you guys the cards and make things look a little nicer for you. Next card is the Two of Cups. Seven of Wands. Justice. Four of Wands. Nine of Cups. And King of Cups. All right, so let's look at this here. So on the surface, doing a reading that takes a look at what's on the surface, what's actually going on underneath, the advice moving forward, and what's likely to happen next. So right now on the surface, it feels probably like you have overcome, you've come to the end of a cycle in your life. Maybe you just came out of something very recently, maybe a kind of a sort of brutal cycle was going on, like things just kind of got really intense for a little while and made you feel very nervous. The Moon card is very interesting because it kind of represents the nervous system and the experience of energy within the nervous system. That's kind of why the little secret of the lobster down there. Lobsters have a very special kind of nervous system where their entire brain is spread out through their whole body, and so it's often a very good symbol for the feeling of the nervous your nervous system's interpretation of energy, basically, which typically we experience as emotion, right? So something kind of intense, kind of you went through very recently, and now, but you seem to have overcome it. You seem to have made it through the other side. You released that energy, so you've kind of cleared out a blockage that may have been interfering with some of your manifestations in life, because that's what manifestation is all about, right? It's your core foundational sense of being. It's your emotional baseline is really the most important thing to pay attention to when it comes to manifestation. It's not always all about visualization and trying to make stuff happen. It's much more about what the magic, the manifestation you're automatically doing all the time, just by virtue of existing as a human being, as a being of consciousness that you are. So you whether or not you did so on purpose, you have kind of leveled out a little bit of the rough edges of your emotional baseline. It may be a very subtle, small change at first, but those changes often bring the biggest external changes with them, even though it doesn't seem in the moment to be that huge and significant. It is. And at the core, the underlying energy of what's going on, we have the Two of Cups and the Seven of Wands together. Let's put these together here. Two of Cups to Seven of Wands. Um, so the Two of Cups, very often, I know most people read that having to do with relationships, but really what it is, it's feelings. It's a merging of emotions. And so obviously in relationships that can be a symbol sometimes where your two people's emotions are kind of merging together. But this is actually more you consciously feeling your feelings. And there's like this essence of like, keep trying, whatever it is you're doing. There's a desire to kind of really maybe feel very motivated to maintain whatever sort of success you may have gained in the recent past regarding, I mean, this could be anything, could be a relationship, could be a job, could be a project, a hobby, whatever it is. But there's an intense desire to keep working, keep trying. This is like the kind of effort that you have to put into something after you've succeeded with something in order to maintain that success. Moving forward into the near future here, we have Justice and the Four of Wands. So justice can be pretty brutal. Really what it represents is the merciless sword of the divine. It is the aspect of reality or of consciousness, God, whatever you want to call it, that makes the exacting slice that's often kind of painful. And like I said, it's justice is pretty merciless. and it is not gentle. And with the Four of Wands here, it could be you could come to some realization about something that you, again, this could be a relationship. The Four of Wands often represents, it's kind of like love in motion. So it's not necessarily love as far as like, oh, I love you. It can be, but it can also be like affection and just you know, feeling excited about a partner or whatever. But it can also be a thing that you love to do. It's like I said, it's love in motion. It's a thing that you're doing that you love doing. But you may have a realization in the near future that something that you thought you loved to do might actually have been rooted in whatever this was that you overcame recently. So you went through this intense sort of process of purging these sort of underlying buried emotions, some kind of trauma. It could be big trauma, little trauma, or just or just maybe some feelings that you just were kind of rattling around in there. And as you purge that and you overcome that, you start getting kind of excited about doing this thing, whatever your thing may be, whatever your hobby or your passion might be, the thing that you enjoy doing, that Four of Wands kind of energy. But you may come to realize that all of a sudden, this thing isn't as exciting as it once was, because it's very possible that whatever was driving this sort of hobby or passion that you were into might have actually been rooted in some kind of fear or nervousness that you have now overcome. And then now that the nervousness and fear that was fueling this thing has disappeared, or at least is beginning to disappear, uh, you may find that you have lost interest in whatever this thing is. And that can be a little bit scary at first. It doesn't have to be, but very often, when you start to kind of especially if you've based any kind of identity, you're based your identity on what you do. And then all of a sudden you stop wanting to do that thing. It can kind of feel like you don't know who you are anymore. But ultimately, as uncomfortable as that can be, that's actually a good thing, because when you start feeling like you don't know who you are anymore, you start to find more of who you actually are, because the person you thought you were may have been very much entangled in compensation and trauma and being driven by negative emotions. And so when that's got, like I said, when that's gone and you start to feel like you don't want to do whatever anymore, and then you start to kind of maybe feel a little bit like, oh no, what am I going to do? And you start to kind of panic and freak out. Well, try not to freak out, because this is part of a process. It's a natural process. It's a good thing that's happening. You're shedding aspects of yourself that are no longer really you. That may have never really been you, like the real you, the core, at your core essence of who you genuinely are, just by virtue of your existence. You know, your spiritual identity. We have the form identity, which is the when we start to identify ourselves based on the clothes we wear, the job we have, the titles we possess, the girlfriend or boyfriend we have, the house, the car. We base our identity on all these things, and they kind of become very important. And when things go wrong, we start to freak out and panic. But then there's the deeper sense of identity, your true identity, which is your essence identity, which is your deeper self, which is where you can, when you begin to sense and identify with your energy, like your core energy, just the aliveness, your consciousness, your pure consciousness. We are all pure consciousness, living as human beings, or using these human meat suits as an antenna for our essence, for our energy. But we get confused and we think that we are this person, this meat suit, this identity that has all these things, and all. You start to think that that's what you are. And when those things are threatened, you get scared. But what's ultimately happening here, as far as with the advice that's coming up, we have the Nine of Cups and King of Pentacles, Nine of Cups and King of Cups. Nine of Cups is very much like satisfaction. It's like he's pretty happy with where he's at. It's peace. It has to do with, and again, going back to this idea of like the emotional baseline. Well, the number 9 is often represented by it represents the astral realm, the moon, the sphere of Yesod on the Kabbalistic tree of life. So the 9s very often have to do with some kind of astral energy, and this is like your core astral energy that you're carrying around, that sort of warps and changes the reality around you and causes things to manifest in a certain way. And you're mastering this. You're learning to master this part of yourself. So really, I think whether you recognize it consciously or not, you're set on a path of really working on the invisible core of yourself. Those energies. Repressed trauma is basically just repressed emotional energy, and that emotional energy usually is programmed with some kind of belief based on something that happened to you, and then you end up manifesting a repeating loop of this same situation with the same sort of emotional charge repeating itself over and over again in your life. But then when you release those emotions and you heal that trauma, suddenly you stop manifesting those things, or at least the manifestation can get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually it just goes away. It can be a process, it can take some time. But I think that you're in this process, whether you realize it or not. The universe is pushing you towards this. And I think this might be true of just about everyone, but for you, this is the content, the way in which it is being expressed right now. Is what we're talking about. Um, the King of Cups really is like the master of emotions. That's what it represents. It's the highest manifestation of water. It's the highest embodiment of like personal embodiment of the element of water. Water is emotions. So the king is like, he knows who he is. He knows how to handle emotions. He knows what they are. He knows how to recognize when something comes up and identify it as either an emotional trigger based on some kind of past trauma, or if it's a genuine upwelling of excitement or a genuine emotion that's coming from a real place rather than a reaction to something that happened in the past. So let's see here. So let's shuffle again and pull a few more cards for you. Uh, if you haven't watched any of them already, I also posted a series of astrology videos for this month that are already up on my channel. Go check those out if you're enjoying this. This tends to be typically how I do readings in general. So if you're into this kind of style of stuff, then feel free to subscribe, contact me for readings, all that kind of stuff. Um, and that's not, and even though I said I don't usually do relationship stuff anymore, if you do have questions about that, I'm not going to turn you away. Just don't be surprised if you get an answer that might not be quite what you're expecting. Okay, so we got the Eight of Wands, momentum, the Six of Cups, emotional healing once again, and the Fool. So yeah, ultimately, there's kind of this momentum in your life of that is pushing you towards this emotional healing, which we talked about. I really think you're processing a lot of stuff from childhood right now. Maybe you have been for a while. Again, either consciously or unconsciously, whether you know that's what's going on or not. Very likely, this is what's really happening. It's emotional healing. So when these situations come up that stress you out and make you scared or make you want to react in a negative way, really what that is the universe is poking your sore spots to show you what you've been ignoring. It's bringing things to the surface, and then you can choose either to process those emotions by observing them, allowing them to move through you, giving them space to move to process. Sometimes that involves crying. Honestly, that's people think I'm joking when I say that a lot of times, but crying honestly is a huge part of the spiritual journey. It's that energy's got to go somewhere. It's got to come out of you. And I mean, if you even look at like old like folk magic traditions, salt water has been used as a purifying substance for a long time because salt sort of traps the energy, sort of traps energy into it, and then the water kind of washes it away. And your tears are exactly the same thing. It's salt water. You're processing, you're pushing out repressed negative emotional energy out of your eyes. Laughing is another way to do it. Extreme exercise can do it, but it's not always the best way to go because sometimes you can kind of overdo it and then it doesn't actually fix. Like that can sometimes be more of an escape than a healing thing, but it can be helpful also. Sweat, like getting it. The emotions, the energy has to come out of you, whatever way that needs to happen. Let it happen. If it means crying, if it means sweating and shaking, or if it means laughing in a really hysterical, strange way that might make people look at you funny, whatever it is, just let it go. Let it get out of you. You can do that, or you can go the other path, which is to allow the emotional reactions that are getting triggered in you to take over you and allow and make you do things, make you take action. If you're getting driven by a negative emotion, you're not getting rid of that emotion. No matter what you do out in the external world to try to mitigate what's going on, you're not going to fix the problem that way. You're going to perpetuate the cycle. So you get angry and then you decide to get in a fight with somebody. Well, that doesn't heal anything. That really just makes it worse. It just feeds you. Then you and the person you're fighting with feed on each other's energetic pain bodies, and then you both. It's bad for both of you. And it doesn't have to be fighting. It can be, almost anything. If your negative emotions are driving you to do something to try to fix it, chances are it's not going to fix it. It's going to make it worse. It's going to take you around the circle once again. And you may have experienced this recently with the earlier part of this reading, with the moon and the world card. I think you may have experienced exactly what I'm talking about to where maybe you actually get what I'm saying now because you've been through it. You've seen it happen. You've seen the thing come up. You saw it come out, and now you feel better, and suddenly certain things start to change. That's alchemy. That's true magic. It's not always about casting spells and manifesting and visualization. That stuff has its time and place. But if you don't do this work first that I'm talking about, this foundational work, you're really only going to manifest your belief systems. You're going to manifest the same old stuff. Say for instance, you grew up with a hang up about money. Maybe your parents stressed about money a lot, just as an example. Doesn't have to be you, but just as an example. Well, you watch them and then you take on that belief that says that money is a stressful thing. It's hard to come by. There's never enough of it, blah, blah, blah. And then you go and you decide to try to manifest more money. Well, you might manifest money, but there's going to be a cap on how much based on your belief system, your unconscious belief about how much you deserve to get or how easy or hard it's going to be to get. So really this practical stuff where you're trying to manifest everything, that's the advanced work. And everybody wants to get to the advanced stages before they do the foundational work. And people, especially on the internet, love to pat themselves on the back for their manifestations, like they're some kind of spiritual master just because things go well for them most of the time. Chances are it's more likely that they just had a decent childhood where they weren't programmed with a whole bunch of terrible beliefs. And so things tend to kind of work out for them. And then they think it's because they are doing it. But no, it's the energy. It's I mean, there's no such thing as magic because everything is magic. You know, uh, everything is magic except the magician. But anyways, the Fool. This is kind of where this is pushing you. The Fool is a very interesting card because they say that the journey begins and ends with the Fool. It's the zero card. Um, One way to describe that is think of like if you ever saw the movie Forrest Gump, where Forrest Gump he was the fool, basically, the first stage of the fool, where he's kind of just going through life. He doesn't really have much of an ego. He doesn't have much of a inner monologue. He's just kind of like kind of the way dogs and animals are, where they're just totally here. They're conscious, but they don't have like a person. They can kind of develop a certain amount of personality, but they don't have an ego. They don't sit there and dwell on things and think about what other people are thinking of them. To an extent, obviously, dogs react to their owners' reactions, but anyways, you get what I'm saying. So Forrest Gump, dogs, animals, these types of things, small children, they're the pre-ego, the pre-thought stage. That's the first part. And a lot of people are walking around in the world like this, where they're not really conscious. They have an awareness, they have consciousness, but they're not really self-aware. They're just kind of driven by unconscious impulses without ever really questioning them. And then you go through this whole spiritual journey, and then at the end of it you come back to the Fool, but this time the Fool is conscious, and it looks exactly the same. So enlightenment is not something that is easy to spot. Somebody who has completed the transformation process is going to seem pretty normal. They're not going to be somebody who goes way out of their way to seem super weird and mystical and act like a saint or a teacher or whatever, and be a self-proclaimed spiritual teacher or whatever. They're going to be pretty normal. And the way that they act will seem the same as everybody else, but they're coming from a more conscious place where they're consciously acting from an authentic place instead of being driven by unconscious impulses. They're just present. And so there's the pre-state, the Forrest Gump state where there's no thoughts and there's just kind of action. And then there's this in-between spot where we have this ego, where we really overthink things and try to control everything and get insecure and go through all this stuff that's all really basically it's all just thoughts. And then the spiritual journey, you go through and you clear out all of the emotional blockages that are causing all of these thoughts, like almost like a short-circuiting wire. And then once those are all gone, you're just here and now. You're just present. So then you're in the same similar state. There's pre-thought, then there's thought, and then there's post-thought. Pre-ego, ego, post-ego. And when I say ego, what I'm really talking about is this conditioned sense of self. That's rooted in basically conditioning from your childhood and the culture and the traumas that you've been through. That's what I mean by ego. That word gets thrown around a lot, and people use it different ways. I'm not really saying that when you transcend the ego or drop the ego, whatever. It's not that you just completely lose your whole sense of being an individual. That's not it. That's not really how that works. You're not killing the ego. You can't kill the ego. You don't want to kill the ego. You need it in order to have an experience of being an individual. At least in the Freudian sense. But if you want to talk about ego in like the Eckhart Tolle kind of sense, as far as being the conditioned self, that's what I mean as far as ego, post ego, that kind of thing. So, anyways, I hope this has all made sense. Hope this has been interesting to you. If you want to get into a private reading, just contact me. All my information is down in the description below. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll talk to you again soon. Take care.